The speaker for today is Gordon T. Belt. Gordon received a BA in Political Science from the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga and an MS in History from MTSU in Murfreesboro. He was a student intern at both the Metro Archives and here at TSLA, after which he became library director and information specialist at the A.C. Combat Memorial Library of the National Model Railroad Association in Chattanooga. Gordon returned to Nashville to become the legislative recording archivist here at TSLA, which led to his becoming the library manager for the First Amendment Center Library at Vanderbilt University. In his spare time, he became the founding editor and publisher of the Posterity Project, a blog whose motto is documenting the links to our past, which he founded in 2008. He received the John H. Thweet Archival Achievement Award in 2009 from the Tennessee Society of Archivists, of which he has served as Vice President and President. And closer to home, he served as the first treasurer of the TSLA Friends from 2010 to 2012. Gordon has returned to TSLA and is now the Director of Public Services. And it is indeed my pleasure to turn the program over to Gordon, who will speak on Finding Your World War I Ancestors at the Tennessee State Library and Archives. Gordon.
Well, thank you, Virginia, for that generous introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm honored that you all are here today. Thank you so much for being here. I want to begin first by recognizing a colleague of mine who really helped me kind of frame this workshop and actually provided one of the handouts that I've distributed, which you'll find in your seat here. Allison Griffey has been diligently working on our Gold Star project, and she's really been instrumental in helping guide me to some resources that I was unaware of, just researching my own World War I ancestor. And so I want to be sure to acknowledge Allison in my opening remarks, and I hope you'll take this handout that she's produced home with you and as sort of a reference guide to what's available here. I'll be scratching the surface of what's in the handout here in the presentation, but I just want to make sure I acknowledge Allison in my remarks. And I also want to let you all know, too, that if you come to this building and you have questions, don't hesitate to call on our public services staff members for help. You know, we're not all experts in World War I. We have different subject specialties, but we know how to find the information you're looking for. And if we don't, we can pull aside a colleague who does. And so we're really here to engage in a conversation with you and help you find the information you need. So don't hesitate to call on us for help, because that's what we're here to do. We're public services. So I wanted to say that on the outset. Now I want to start off with an outline of what I plan to cover today. I don't plan to lecture you like the young lady is here. This is a neat photo. I thought it was kind of appropriate, but I'm not going to lecture you today. I'm just going to give you kind of an overview of World War I, Tennessee's role in it. And then I'm going to delve a little bit into my research into my own ancestor who fought in the Great War, William Paul Goins. He was my great-grandfather on my father's side. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through the steps I took to find information about him and his service in World War I. And then I want to take a little bit of time to talk about more broadly some collections that are here that I think are interesting. They tell different stories about the Great War. They may or may not necessarily reflect what you're specifically interested in gathering, but they kind of give you an overview of what's here and what may give you a broader context of the collection that we have here. So that's our outline today. Now, finding your World War I ancestor can present unique challenges, and they call it the Great War, and they did that because it was just such a worldwide conflict. No one could imagine anything surpassing it. And of course, World War II happened. And it's a lot of times people forget about World War I because World War II was just such an ordeal, and it's more closely in time connected to our past. And so this is often called the Forgotten War. And to try and reconstruct the lives and locate records of those who served in this great war, you must rely on a variety of different resources. And I'm not going to make any claims to being an expert in World War I history, but I've had an opportunity to kind of look at some of these records and try and find my ancestor. And so I kind of want to just use this opportunity to share my experience in finding these pieces of information and putting this puzzle together. So I hope it will inspire you in your own search for your World War I ancestor. Now, most of us became familiar with Tennessee's connection to World War I through Sergeant Alvin York and tales of his heroism during the Great War. His decisive and effective actions during that conflict led to the capture of 132 German soldiers. And while he never claimed to have acted alone, his actions were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor and a Hero's Welcome Home to Tennessee. Many other Tennesseans served valiantly in the war. Over 100,000, in fact, served or volunteered and were drafted in the First World War. 6 of them won the Medal of Honor, including our Sergeant York. Now, the hostilities broke out in 1914 after the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. And then the European Allied powers, Great Britain, France, and Russia, fought against the Central powers of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey. And it wasn't until 1917 that the United States entered the war. Much later, the United States attempted to maintain a neutral stance until that year. And by the war's official end, in January of 1920, more than 70 million military personnel worldwide had been mobilized, including 4 million from the United States, and 9 million souls were lost in this conflict. Now, civilians were also swept up in this conflict too. They served as nurses, ambulance drivers. They filled vacant jobs in offices and factories. And they planted victory gardens and sewed bandages. And in Europe, citizens watched their homelands be destroyed by the war. Up to 8 million civilians died as a result of the conflict in World War I. And so it's astounding that we call this the Forgotten War because of that, the weight of that loss. But our ancestors never forgot it. They lived it. And so by learning about their experiences, we can remember their experiences and honor their sacrifice and here and around the globe. So today I want to honor an ancestor of mine. This is a family photograph of my great-grandfather and his family. The shorter gentleman in the middle is William Paul Goins. He is my great-grandfather. Next to him on the left is my great-grandmother, Lillian. I actually knew her growing up as a young child, have very fond memories of her. I never knew my great-grandfather. He died long before I was born. And my grandmother on the right, Pauline, this is her picture. And so I want to take this time to kind of trace his World War I experience and hopefully honor him in the process and retrace his steps in the battle through these documents. Now, I started off rather simply just going to our website. But you have to have a basic knowledge of the soldier's service in order to move forward in your research. And you have to search different aspects of the site to find what you're looking for. It's helpful to know the company, the troop or battery to which the soldier was assigned. And often this information can be located in family papers that you may have. Yes, sir?
It's a little blurry at times. What's the web address?
I'm sorry, thank you. The web address is http://sos.tn.gov/TSLA. That's our homepage, and from that site, you can launch into a wide variety of resources. But that's a good place to start. Thanks for pointing that out. Now, it's helpful to know bits of information before you go about searching. As I said, knowing the company your ancestors served, the troop or battery which they were assigned is helpful. And you can find this information either talking to a family member, finding some papers they may have left behind. An obituary often leads you to some sources. And so armed with the information that I gleaned from my family and conversations with them, I had a few details going in that kind of helped me narrow the search, because I start searching blindly for William Goins, I'm going to have a lot of searches that are just irrelevant. There were 2 or 3 William Goinses running around, and I had to know specifically who he was in the search. So I went to the website, and then under the Library and Archives, there's a history and genealogy section. And when you click onto that, you get a page that looks like this. And on the right, there's several categories. And so you want to scroll down to the category that I have highlighted with the gray arrow, military research. And under that, there are several options that will be delivered to you. And going back to the Revolutionary War up until, you'll see World War II in there, but World War I is what we'll focus on for this example. And so you go through that, and you have a list of resources here. Now I want to focus specifically on the resource at the bottom. There's a name index under that category that says Tennessee World War I Veterans Questionnaires. So I want to see that name index. It's really helpful. There will lead you to a county index of names of soldiers who served in World War I. Now, knowing my great-grandfather lived in Marion County at the time, it's easy enough to point to the letter M on the county index and look up Marion County to see if his name was listed. And so that delivered me to this page. It's a page of Tennessee World War I veterans in Marion County. It's listed alphabetically by last name, then your first name, middle initial in some cases. Age or date of birth varies depending on the record, what you see there. The birthplace. Occasionally you will see some notes in that note field, which are helpful. And then the page number is important. That will direct you specifically to the page on the microfilm reel that you want to find your ancestor. And lo and behold, there is William P. Goins. I found him on our website. He was 26 years old when he registered for service. He was born in Norman, Tennessee. I found out later that Norman, when he was born in James County, which no longer exists. It's now, James County is more or less part of Hamilton County and part of Bradley County. But at the time he was born, it was James County, and he was born in Norman, Tennessee, a really rural part of the state. And this led me to consult the source for this material, Record Group 36. This is the ex-soldiers in World War I from 1917 to 1919. And here is his abstract. This record was really a neat find for me, just beginning to look for his service. It contains this record group contains the abstracts of World War I service records compiled during the 1920s, after the war period. It's in bound volumes, and it includes a wealth of information, including data on age, place of birth, enlistment and discharge dates, and unit and branch in which the serviceman fought. Now, this is arranged alphabetically by county and then by surname. And here in this record, I discovered that my great-grandfather served as a cook in the U.S. Army's Company B, 105th Engineer Combat Battalion, CK, cook. I found out that's what that meant later on. And you can see he reported for duty on September 20th, 1917, born in Norman, Tennessee, which we found out on the website. He was originally assigned to the 307th F Signal Battalion until October 14th of 1917. And then he transferred to Company B of the 105th Engineers until his discharge date on April 28th, 1919. His rank was private, first class. You can see that in the information there. And as I said, he served as a cook during the Army during this time. And it gives the service dates, May 26, 1918, until April 13th, 1919. He was honorably discharged on April 28th, 1919. So that was step one in the find. So following up further, I wanted to consult the Library and Archives World War I draft registration cards. I looked at them on microfilm, but they are available through Fold 3 as well. And I'll talk a little bit about Fold 3 later in the talk, but I want to focus on microfilm reel number 1438. That's where these are located. And you can find this information, as I said, on Fold 3.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Fold 3 or Fold 3?
Fold, F-O-L-D, the number 3. And that's a database that is proprietary within the Library and Archives. You can subscribe to it outside of this building, but within the building itself, you don't have to have a subscription to access it in one of our terminals. Yes?
This is just Tennessee. Do similar records exist for other states?
Yes. You can use Fold 3 to look at other states' records as well within the building. I'm focusing on Tennessee for this talk. Yes, sir.
These service records that you just showed us, would those also be in St. Louis?
I'm not sure.
Not
Do you?
World War One.
No,
Yeah.
most of
It's
World
in-
War I were destroyed.
It's just World War. It's in DC.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think St. Louis. But we have a microfilm and scan versions of that. So this is his registration card, and I was able to glean a little bit more information about him. Of course, his age we knew at the time of his enlistment is 26 years of age. You can see that in the corner there. His place of residence was Jasper, Tennessee, which is Marion County, which I knew. His date of birth, December 24th, 1890. You can see he was born in James County. And you can see his occupation was a public ferryman. This was something that I had been told anecdotally by relatives. But it's really the first time that I saw on paper a declaration that this was what he did for a living. So it was really kind of cool to see that. He was employed by his father on the Tennessee River, and basically his job was to shuttle people across the Tennessee River. We didn't have the bridges you have back then, and so he was able to do that for a living until World War I. And so you also see that he was married at the time that he registered. He had a wife, my great-grandmother, Lillian. And so that was a really exciting find, to find that piece of information. Now, I wanted to get a bigger picture of his service and what went on in his unit. And so I consulted a number of published sources for this information. This is one I want to highlight. It's a multi-volume set called The Order of Battle of the United States Land Forces in the World War. And it's available here at the Library and Archives. And it contains a wealth of information, including records of events related to each military division serving in the Great War, and the names of the commanders and soldiers serving in that division. So it's a really neat published resource to find names of folks who served in the war. And it really helped me get a more vivid picture of the types of engagement his unit was involved in the conflict. Another published source that I really enjoyed flipping through was the history of the 105th Regiment of Engineers. I mentioned this was the unit that my great-grandfather served in during World War I. And so I had a really keen interest in looking at this book. It not only lists the officers and soldiers who served in the regiment, but it also has several foldouts. I did a scan of one of the foldouts. This is actually a foldout of Company B, the unit my great-grandfather served in, and it's much longer than what I'm able to show you here. It folds out quite a bit. Now, I will say, unfortunately, this item is not available for viewing today. It's in our conservation lab. It's had a lot of use. People fold the fold-outs in incorrect places, and it's received some wear and tear. So our conservators are working hard to make sure that's well preserved. It's in the lab now, and I suspect within a few days it will be back on the shelves available for research. But in the meantime, I wanted to direct your attention to it, so if you want to come back later and look at that resource, you can do so with that information. Now, I've already found a wealth of information just looking at these sources that I've shown you, but I really wanted to learn more. I wanted to also get a picture of what my great-grandfather's community was thinking about the war at the time. And so for that, I went back and looked at some newspaper accounts of the conflict. And as some of you may know, we have the largest collection of Tennessee newspapers on microfilm that you'll find anywhere. And so this is a really great resource to think about looking at if you want to get a broader context of the conflict. But also, it's also a place where you can find, if you're fortunate, a list of people who were registering for service in World War I. So the community would publish these lists of men who had showed up and registered and were ready to serve their country. And so I looked Marion County, Jasper, I looked at newspapers in that county, but I also focused on Chattanooga, which has to be my hometown, but Chattanooga is the largest city in proximity to Jasper. And so I looked there, and I found several articles listing the names of the men reporting for duty. And I also located a reference to Camp Gordon. It's not coincidence, my name's Gordon, but it just happens to be the camp that my great-grandfather was sent to once he enlisted. And so it's kind of a neat little symmetry there. But that camp, the mention of that camp in the newspaper got me thinking about, what went on in that camp. What records exist that might show that my great-grandfather was at that camp, other than these newspaper accounts. And so for that, I went to Ancestry Institution. Yes, sir?
Is that Ancestor.com or that screenshot, or is it from State Archives?
That screenshot is from the Library and Archives Ancestry Institution page. Ancestry Institution.
Up a little bit.
It's from the Ancestry Institution page.
Okay, thank you.
You can, if you have a subscription to Ancestry.com, you can get to that piece of information. I just happen to use Ancestry Institution because it's available here at work. And it's available to all of you as well at the terminals. If you want to access Ancestry and you do not have a subscription, you can do that here in the building. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't have to have a subscription at home. If you come here, you can research Ancestry through this porthole and find information just like I did here. So I'm interested in Camp Gordon. I'm interested in my great-grandfather's service there. And so I did some searching of this resource, and I located this intriguing list of men ordered to report to local board for military duty at the top of the page that I've highlighted up above. And within this page, this document popped up. It's just, there's my great-grandfather, William Paul Goins. And he's listed among several men who reported for duty at Camp Gordon. Now, I learned through some additional research that the state of Georgia had 5 military installations in the United States when the United States entered World War I in 1917. And Georgia had many training camps as well. Georgia's close proximity to Chattanooga, just across the border, and you're in Georgia. And Camp Gordon opened in July of 1917. It was located in Chamblee, northeast of Atlanta. And it was the training site of the famous 82nd All-American Division. And that division included men from several states, including Tennessee. Just a quick side note, Camp Gordon was named after John Brown Gordon, who was a major general in the Confederate Army, and a Georgia governor, a U.S. senator, and a businessman. And so that record really gave me another piece of the puzzle to kind of trace my great-grandfather's march towards the European theater.
Can you go back to that slide?
Sure, certainly.
What were some of the column headings that the handwriting is in?
It is very hard to tell there, but you have dates in which they were reported for duty.
So all those are date fields?
Those are date fields, dates in which they were enlisted there. And I believe there's a column there, I can't read it, but I believe when I looked at it, it listed when they were sent overseas. So.
Okay, thank you.
And so this is a multi-page document. I'm just showing you the page that is relevant to my ancestor. So, and again, it's available on the Ancestry Institution site as well as Ancestry.com. Now, I mentioned Fold 3. I'm going to talk a little bit about Fold 3 here. This focuses primarily on military records. And it includes military from the Revolutionary War up until, I believe there may be some World War II records there. But you've got pension applications, you have Civil War records there. But for the purposes of this talk, I'll focus specifically on World War I. A key tip to remember when you're looking at Fold 3 is to use the browse function. A lot of people intuitively click the search bar, and that can cast a wide net, basically. And so what we encourage people to do when they're researching Fold 3 is to do a more focused browse search. And that will actually break out the sources into categories. And from there you can kind of drill down into specifically the types of records you want to research. So if you've already looked at census records, you can kind of dump that and look at something more specific to your needs. So use the browse feature on that. And so I'm going to browse for William Goins. And a variety of records pop up. And as I mentioned, the census, so you're going to kind of get a wide net. And you can see at the top here, I really, in my browsing, drilled it down. I drilled it down to Tennessee, and then I wanted to focus on a 5-year period, from 1915 to 1920 to just sort of capture that information. And one item that kind of stood out to me, I already saw the draft registration card, so I didn't really need to look at that again. But this headstone application was really interesting to me. And so I wanted to look at that, because I'd never seen that before. So I zoom in, and there's my great-grandmother's signature. This was after my great-grandfather's death in 1958. And what transpired was that my granduncle, Neil, and my great-grandmother, Lillian, applied for a headstone application, a military headstone application. And so there's some details here that are sort of mirrored in the other records that I found. He was in the Army, Company B, 105th Engineers. It says here that his honorable discharge date. It gives me the location of the cemetery. And so this was a really neat find for me, because when I visited Ladd Cemetery, I found his grave marker, just as they had wished it to be. So it's really a personal connection there. Yes?
What was his birthday, 1890 or 91?
Well, that was confusing to me too, because, they put in there 1890, and then someone scratched it out and put, or 1891 and put 1890, and so I kind of wondered that myself, but family members insisted it was 1891, and apparently they convinced the government of that in their conversations with them. Yes?
I haven't done the math, but the first thing that came to my mind about the difference would be maybe if he was born in 1891, he might have been too young to serve.
Possibly. And, well, he was 26. That's right. So I'm not sure what the age limit was.
Be too old to serve.
He may have feared he was too old. Who knows?
35.
30. Okay. Well, then that I think it was just basically some miscommunication then between the military and the family, and they decided, okay, 1891 it is. So this is really a connection here that was meaningful to me, and so using the records here at the Library and Archives, I was able to kind of piece together his service.
When did Tennessee require birth certificates? That might be too. They were going on memory.
Yeah, 1908.
Yeah.
And so, obviously you wouldn't have had a birth certificate. And so, they would have to rely on the family members for that information.
One family member might
Yeah.
say another.
He had a big family, and they all insisted, I think, 1891 was the date. So I've reached sort of the end of my great-grandfather's journey, but I want to shift gears a little bit and talk more broadly about the resources that we have here at the Library and Archives that may be able to help you with your research. The internet has really provided us with a wonderful opportunity to share this information that was once put away in a box that, while it's cool to go and look at in the box, If you live a considerable distance from us, you're not able to see that. So the internet's kind of opened up the doors for us to be able to share some of this information online. And so through the Tennessee Virtual Archive, you can actually go to the Tennessee Virtual Archive, the website that I gave you earlier, to our homepage. There'll be a list of online resources, and you will be able to see the Tennessee Virtual Archive there. There's just a wealth of information that we're adding consistently to that page on World War I materials. Mostly you'll see is photographs on this particular site. And they're primarily chosen from the 30th Old Hickory Division, which provides a really interesting visual history of the Great War. Now, there are several fascinating stories buried within these photographs and records, and so I want to take a minute, sort of a diversion, to kind of share with you one particular story that I love from World War I. And it's a story found within the Luke Lee papers here at the Library and Archives. Luke Lee commanded the 114th Field Artillery. It was the only fully volunteer regiment of the 30th Division. Luke Lee was also a key figure in the Reform and Prohibition movements, and he was a prominent figure in 20th century Democratic Party politics in Tennessee. Now, his papers contain approximately 32 cubic feet of 9 oversized boxes, and they span a wide range of dates from 1826 to 1993. But I want to focus specifically on Luke Lee's World War I diaries, which are really fascinating. He compiled these diaries during his service in the war. And a lot of information can be gleaned from those diaries. A lot of information, too, can be gleaned from the photographs. They're in boxes number 66 and 67, if you'd like to reference that. And then also, this collection is also microfilm, so we encourage you to look at the microfilm number 1541 for that. Now, within this collection of diaries, there's a really colorful description of Luke Lee's daring plan to kidnap the Kaiser. He was the dethroned emperor of Germany who had fled to Holland. And some of you may have heard this tale. It's been publicized quite a bit. But according to Luke Lee, the idea to kidnap the Kaiser was originated at a tea with the Duke of Connaught in June of 1918. This is obviously well into the war. And during the tea, the Duke boasted of being an uncle to both King George V of England and Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. And so Lee would later write of this tea. I'm going to read a quote. He says, quote, "We realized that all the force of the British crown would be exerted to the utmost to protect the royal kinsman. But Lee believed, quote, that the Kaiser should be made to suffer in some small measure the orgy of torture that he had inflicted upon more than half of mankind. And so shortly after the armistice, the Kaiser abdicated his crown and he went into exile. And he, in Holland, where he was in exile, remained neutral throughout the war. And with the aim of kidnapping the Kaiser and bringing him back to Paris to be tried for war crimes, Lee traveled to the castle where the Kaiser was living in exile. And with several officers and men accompanying him, he arrived at the castle on January 4th, 1919 at 8 p.m. Lee and his men were amazingly able to talk their way into the castle, but they were not able to meet the Kaiser. They left when two Dutch company infantry arrived to question their appearance there. Now, the Army probably would have preferred to ignore the incident had it not been for an official complaint by the Kaiser. He leveled a complaint through the Dutch government, and the Kaiser wanted charges pressed against Lee for, quote, appearing uninvited at the castle of his host and making him nervous. Yes, sir.
I can add this a little bit. A friend of mine's grandfather, Alan, was one of the officers there, and it's a little bit more colorful than what the archives. They loaded up in the car with some confiscated liquor and drove up and banged on the door. And they were finally politely told to go away and escorted to the Dutch border.
There's also a tale of one of the officers stealing an ashtray, a monogrammed
That's
ashtray.
actually true. I've seen
Yeah.
that ashtray.
And I believe one of the officers ended up being president or an official with the Cincinnati Reds, and he displayed that ashtray prominently in his offices as sort of a trophy of the experience. So thanks for sharing that.
And he's actually from here in town. He's one of the Allen. I can't remember his name, but it's Allen. Buddy Allen, Carpet, and all that bunch of Allens.
Yeah, I believe the National Retrospect did a really nice piece about this incident, and I've seen it published elsewhere. It's a really fascinating tale, and I'm puzzled why it hasn't become a book or movie. It's just really interesting.
It's one of those family stories that they just sort of smile and
Yeah.
talk about. It's just like
Absolutely. So the Army was forced to conduct this investigation after this incident. Obviously, the Kaiser's complaining. And so, as the story goes, General John Pershing, the man who led America's expeditionary forces in victory over Germany in the war, he officially called Lee's trip, quote, an amazingly indiscreet, which I kind of doubt that given what went down, but unofficially, he is said to have told General Bullard, commander of the U.S. Second Army, quote, I'd given a year's pay to have been able to take Lee's trip into Holland and enter the castle without invitation. So he really admired Lee for the guts he thought Lee had to go into that castle and attempt to kidnap the Kaiser.
One other thing about the Kaiser, there's actually a Facebook page with his residence and such in Holland.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's in German and Dutch, but you can get translations. And they actually have tours and such.
Wow, that's great.
So
Road trip.
anybody's going such, and they actually have a very nice museum and other things.
That's wonderful.
Somebody might like, if somebody's going over, they might like to make.
Absolutely. So, one other collection I want to highlight, and it actually connects back to my search for my great-grandfather's service in the war, is this collection, the Frierson Warfield Papers. This collection was from Francis Warfield. He arrived in France as a first lieutenant in Company E, 2nd Battalion of the 105th Engineers. Remember, my great-grandfather was Company B in that same regiment. And Warfield ended the war as a captain of the headquarters army in the same regiment. The 105th Engineers and the rest of the 30th Infantry Division took part in fighting in Belgium. And so Belgium was the theater where my great-grandfather was serving. This collection contains a wealth of photographic records, including one particular photograph that is important to me. This is a mess hall. Now, it is Company E, it's not Company B, but if it were Company B, I suspect my great-grandfather would be somewhere in that mess tent serving the troops and giving them meals to sustain themselves during the war. So, while it's not a direct connection, I feel a connection to this photograph for that reason, the fact that he was a cook and one of his comrades was a cook serving the soldiers in the war. So I really, it's a really blurry picture, but it's one of my favorites in the collection. So now another collection that I want to highlight. This is all online. This is the Puryear family photograph albums. We don't get a lot of photographs depicting the air war of World War I. And so this is really a fascinating look into that aspect of the conflict. This collection documents the careers in the United States Army Air Service during and after World War I of two brothers from Gallatin, Tennessee. George Wright Puryear was a fighter pilot in the 95th Aero Squadron. He was taken prisoner by the Germans and subsequently became the first American officer to escape from a German prisoner war camp. And so he was in the news, and it's a quite important person in the narrative of this war. George's older brother, Alfred, played an equally important, albeit behind-the-scenes role in the Great War. And he was a supply officer in the Stock Records Division, Material Division. And he was stationed in Paris. And so he was responsible for all the manifest supplies that were shipped to various air service units throughout France. Now, the Puryear family photographs, they offer really a fascinating glimpse into the air campaign of World War I. And so if your ancestor may have served in that kind of capacity, even though you might not find him in this record collection, it really kind of gives you a context of what kind of service he would have engaged in. And so it's really worth a look. I put the website there. It's a little lengthy, but I believe that site may be on your handout. If it's not, we can certainly direct you to that information. Now, I'd like to return to a record group that may have a little more relevance to genealogy research directly. And I mentioned it in my opening remarks. It's the Gold Star records. And you might be wondering, what's Gold Star? After the United States entered World War I in 1917, Americans sought a national symbol to express their grief as thousands of American soldiers died in military camps at home and battle overseas. And soon afterward, families began to place a gold star on their homes and the windows of their homes to announce a loss of a loved one. And so 2 months after the armistice was signed, Tennessee General Assembly tasked John Trotwood Moore, who was the state librarian, and he was also the chairman of the new Tennessee Historical Committee. They tasked him with the following tasks: to, quote, collect, compile, index, and arrange all data and information of every kind and character related to the part that Tennessee has played in the Great War, and turned the same over to the state. So he's asking for a lot of material, and he got it too. This is a really a great resource to consult. It's in Record Group 53, which I've noted there. And again, I apologize for the lengthy URL, but this information is easily accessible on our website and should be in the handout as well. And I can put that slide back up at the end of the program if you'd like later. Now, Gold Star records are comprised of information on Tennessee soldiers who died of wounds or disease during World War I. As you can see from the bullet points, they're filed alphabetically. The information contains date of birth, occupation, parents, branch of service, and date of death. And some of the files may even include letters and pictures and newspaper clippings, which are really a fascinating glimpse into some deeply personal aspects of the war. Yes.
My dad has pictures, pieces of paper dating back 1800 that's been kept through the years. Would they be interested in having some of those military pictures? There's groups of men.
I think that's something that Myers is planning to discuss a little bit at the end here too. We're getting ready to launch a project where we're encouraging folks to bring that material in to scan, and so I'm going to ask Myers to speak a little more.
And I have one other question.
Sure.
Is it very difficult to find relatives in researching relatives of men that served?
Relatives of men that
Well, my
served.
grandmother always
Yeah.
said that we're kin to Alvin C. York.
Mm-hmm.
That's my last name, York.
Mm-hmm.
That we had relatives in Jamestown.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I'd like to research.
Well, as I said, there's some of these files contain letters to home. They may contain photographs, and there may be a photograph of an ancestor there. So it just depends on the file and how much information was submitted in the file as to what you'll find there.
Okay.
There's always a chance you'll find a connection, but
Just something you have to research.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
No problem.
It might be worth a trip up to Jamestown and go to the Puryear County Registrar's Office and such, because I learned this research most of my grandfather and two of my great uncles had filed their discharge papers with the county register. So rather than having to
Fender's
sort it,
County?
just compare Fender's County and Jamestown, Tennessee.
Right.
There's no good way to get from here to there, but, it's an all-day drive, but it's well worth the
Will
trip.
TSLA have the Fentress County records here on Microsoft?
We'll have county records on microfilm, so you can look there as well. So,
But the country store that you see in the movie, in the Sergeant York movie,
Right.
is still there. It's still in operation.
Just trying to get somebody to ride there with me.
It's
Seems difficult.
a fur piece.
Thank you.
you're welcome. Now, Gold Star records contain a variety of information, as we've said. Yes, sir.
I also have a copy of the Gold Star books, which are a compilation of all 50 states and anything. Would you all be interested in me bringing them down? And
Absolutely.
You look through and scan anything that might be relevant.
Certainly.
They're not in great shape, but they're 100-year-old books.
Yeah.
But I'd be willing to share, put them
Thank
where
you.
they can be shared.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. So, one of the examples I want to kind of point out to show you the variety of records that you can find here. This is a Gold Star record of an African American man who served in World War I.
Glad to share information in the Lord of Bell books I have also.
Pardon me?
That would have been rather unusual, wouldn't it?
Well, this particular one is rather unique. Military was still segregated at the time, and so a lot of African Americans were their service was in labor units instead of combat units, and so this was one notable exception to that. This was the 369th Infantry Regiment, nicknamed the Harlem Hellfighters. And this particular regiment arrived in France in January of 1918. And it was given only labor service duties until April, when it was assigned to the French Army. And so that unit spent 191 days in combat, and that was more than any other American unit. It was also the first Allied unit to reach the Rhine River in November of 1918. And all told, 171 of the regiment's officers and men received awards for bravery. So it's really a unique window into that world of World War I. Now, the letters also include an intimate glimpse into the lives of these soldiers. I wanted to share this one with you. It was really quite touching. This is John T. Sharp. He was a corporal in Company D of the 117th Infantry Regiment. He was wounded in combat on October 8th, 1918, and he died of his wounds 4 days later. Now, his letter home, his May letter of 1918, reveals some of the hardships of war. And in this letter, he's corresponding to his mother from, quote, somewhere in France. And I want to read you an excerpt from his letter. I thought it was really fascinating. He says, "Dearest Mumsy, lying in my pup tent flat down with 2 blankets between me and the ground, I'm feeling fine. I just ate dinner and I am as tight as a tick. Get plenty of it, but I like to starve coming over here. It was an English bed and English cooks, and all they could cook was boiled spuds. Never want to see another boiled spud as long as I live. And my goodness, you never saw such a pile of spuds and eggs as all they have in France. I couldn't eat them all. Now, you know about how many there was. We are way up in the country now, and this is a beautiful country. People don't live out in farmhouses all scattered about as they're grouped together in little villages. Billets is what they call them. And wood and paper is about as plentiful as hen teeth in this country. I've got so much I want to tell you, but paper is so scarce and there is so much I can't write, but believe your son John when he will have something to tell you when he gets back. The hardest thing about this war is getting us over here and getting back. Whipping the Huns is going to be a small matter of time and the cost of very few lives. Cigarettes are scarce here, but I understand the government gives us 3 packs a week. They're not allowed the people to send us any, for it takes up too much shipping space. All my love and a million kisses for you, and don't worry, it is you I am fighting for, and I am safe as if I was home. Your loving son, John T." And it's sad that he had died in battle before he could come home to tell his mother about the service. So, there are many other World War I records that are available here at the Library and Archives, and this presentation only scratches the surface of what's available here. We're looking for more ways to really display this information and make it available to you, and one of the ways we're doing that is through social media. And I wanted to throw up this slide from our Flickr account. Flickr is a visual medium that allows us to share images, and these are images from all the Gold Star photographs in those folders. And we're working to make this story available not just in social media, but on a variety of platforms as well. But I wanted to highlight this one as one example, as the ways in which we're trying to share this information, so it's not buried in a folder that you'll rarely be able to access. So, by the end of the war, Americans celebrated victory, and they reunited with their families. And thankfully, my great-grandfather survived the war. He later became an employee with the Tennessee Valley Authority. I have him circled here. He was one of many of the men who helped build the Hales Bar Dam in Marion County. It was one of the first major dams to be built in the United States. My grandmother, Pauline, was born shortly thereafter, and of course she married my grandfather, and then my father, the young man on the left, became a military man himself, joined the Navy, met my mom, and the rest is history. So if you want to learn more, I would encourage you to visit our website, make use of the handouts that I provided, talk to my colleagues down in Public Services to help direct you to information. Thank you all very much.